21 days. That's all the time the town had to fulfill a dying veteran's final request. What they discovered in his attic, boxes of unsent letters, faded photographs, and Bronze Star medals he never claimed, would send them on a mission that proved love and honor, no deadline. Before we begin, let us know where you're watching from, and if you believe that true heroism often hides in the quietest hearts, please like and subscribe, because what you're about to witness will restore your faith in the power of community and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Harold Hal Thompson had lived on Maple Street in Millbrook, Pennsylvania for 42 years. In all that time, his neighbors knew only 3 things about him. He fixed bicycles for free in his garage, he never missed putting his flag out on holidays, and he minded his own business. The small town of Millbrook, population 3,847, was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, except when it came to Hal. He was polite but private, helpful but never intrusive. Children loved him because he could fix any broken bike and never charged a penny. At 87, Hal was tall and lean, with silver hair kept military short and hands that were still steady despite decades of precise work. The only hint of his past was a Korean War veteran license plate and a faded flag sticker in his garage workshop. Dr. Sarah Chen had been Hal's physician for 15 years, and even she knew little about his personal history. When Hal walked into her office on a Tuesday morning in October, moving more slowly than usual, she was concerned. "Been having some chest pains," Hal admitted quietly, "and I'm more tired than usual." The tests revealed advanced lung cancer. At his age, aggressive treatment would cause more suffering than benefit. "How long do I have?" Hal asked calmly. "With palliative care, probably 3 to 4 weeks, Dr. Chen said gently. Hal nodded thoughtfully. "That should be enough time." "Enough time for what?" "To take care of some unfinished business." Dr. Chen assumed he meant getting his affairs in order. She had no idea that Hal was referring to a promise he had made to 7 young men in a frozen foxhole in Korea 62 years ago. Hal spent 2 days making arrangements. He updated his will, donated his truck, and prepaid his funeral expenses. But his most important task was writing a letter to Mayor Patricia Williams, asking her to come see him on urgent business. When she arrived Thursday evening, she found Hal surrounded by cardboard boxes he had brought down from his attic. The boxes contained papers, photographs, and military items. "Thank you for coming, Patricia," Hal said. "I have something important to ask of you." "Hal, are you feeling all right? You look." "I'm dying," Hal said simply. "Cancer. 3 weeks, maybe 4. I need the town's help with something I should have done 60 years ago." He gestured to the boxes. "I've been carrying these since Korea." He pulled out a worn photograph of 8 young men in winter military gear. "In 1951, I was part of a patrol near the Chosin Reservoir. 8 of us went out. Only 1 came back. That was me. The other 7 died getting me out when I was wounded." He pointed to each face. Tommy Martinez from San Antonio, Billy Kowalski from Detroit, James Washington from Montgomery, Frank O'Brien from Boston, David Kim from Los Angeles, Mike Rossetti from Philadelphia, and Johnny Bear Claw from Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. Mayor Williams studied the photograph, seeing Hal as a 19-year-old. "They died for me," Hal continued. "Before that last patrol, we made a pact. If any of us didn't make it home, the survivors would write to their families. But when I got home, I couldn't find them." He pulled out stacks of letters. "So I kept writing to them. Every year on the anniversary of their deaths. 60 years worth of letters I never got to send." Hal showed her a box containing bronze stars. "I never claimed the medals they awarded me. Didn't seem right when they were the ones who deserved recognition." He looked directly at Mayor Williams. "Patricia, I'm dying, and I've run out of time. But with today's technology, maybe it's still possible to find these families. Maybe it's not too late to deliver these letters and make sure these 7 heroes are remembered. You want us to help you find the families of 7 soldiers who died 62 years ago? I want you to help me keep a promise," Hal said. "These boys saved my life, and I owe them this much." Mayor Williams looked at the boxes, at the photographs, at 60 years of unfinished business. "How long do we have?" 3 weeks, maybe 4 if I'm lucky. We'll do everything we can." Mayor Williams called an emergency town hall meeting for the next evening. By 7 o'clock, the community center was packed with over 200 people. She told them about Hal's diagnosis and his promise. She showed them the photograph and read from letters Hal had written to families he could never find. "Your son Tommy was the bravest man I ever knew," she read from a letter to Mrs. Martinez. "When the shooting started, he could have run, but he stayed to help me when I was wounded. He died covering our retreat. I think about his smile every day, how he talked about your cooking, and how he couldn't wait to get home to San Antonio." By the time she finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. "Hal has 3 weeks to live," she concluded. "He's asking us to help him find these 7 families. I know it seems impossible, but I believe if any community can do this, it's ours." The response was overwhelming. Librarian Martha Henderson volunteered to coordinate genealogical research. High school computer teacher David Chang offered to organize online searches with his students. VFW Commander Frank Morrison would reach out to military records and veteran groups nationwide. The town divided into 7 teams, each focusing on one fallen soldier. The race against time had begun. Team Martinez, led by Spanish teacher Elena Rodriguez, started with Tommy from San Antonio. Using old city directories, they traced his family's restaurant and found it had been sold in 1965. They contacted Hispanic cultural organizations and found a church bulletin from 1952 mentioning a memorial mass for Private Thomas Martinez, survived by parents Miguel and Rosa Martinez and sister Carmen. With the sister's name, they traced through marriage records and found Carmen had married Roberto Silva in 1954. They tracked the Silva family through decades of moves, eventually finding Carmen's grandson, David Silva, working as a mechanic in Houston. Team Kowalski faced challenges in Detroit, a city that had seen massive population shifts. Retired auto worker Stan Kowalski contacted the United Auto Workers Union, searching through old membership records, until they found Stanislaw Kowalski, who had worked at Ford and lost a son in Korea. Team Washington, coordinated by Pastor Robert Johnson, focused on Montgomery, Alabama. They reached out to historically black churches, knowing church records were often more complete than government records for African American families in the 1950s. Mount Olive Baptist Church found records of a memorial service for Corporal James Washington, son of Deacon Samuel Washington. Team O'Brien contacted the Boston Public Library's Irish Ancestry Department and the Ancient Order of Hibernians. Team Kim reached out to early Korean immigrant communities in Los Angeles. Team Rossetti started with Catholic churches in South Philadelphia. Team Bear Claw contacted tribal offices at Pine Ridge Reservation. On day 12, Team Martinez achieved the first breakthrough. David Silva answered his phone in Houston to hear Elena Rodriguez explaining about his great-uncle Tommy. "My great-uncle Tommy? We've always wondered what happened to him. My grandmother Carmen talked about him sometimes, how my great-grandparents never got over losing him." David drove to Millbrook that night. When Mayor Williams brought him to Hal's house, both men stared at each other. "You look just like him," Hal said, voice shaking. "You have Tommy's eyes." David showed Hal family photographs of Tommy as a child. "My grandmother saved everything. She always hoped someone would come forward who knew what happened." Hal read the letters he had written to Tommy's family over the years, and David wept hearing how his great-uncle had died saving Hal's life. "He was 19, Hal said. "He could have saved himself, but he stayed to help me. He died a hero." That night, Hal wrote his final letter to the Martinez family. "Mrs. Carmen Silva, sister of Private Tommy Martinez, your brother died saving my life in Korea on December 2, 1951. He was the bravest, kindest young man I ever knew. He talked about you every day. When the shooting started, he could have run to safety, but he stayed to protect me. He died a hero's death, and I have honored his memory every day for 62 years. David drove back to San Antonio and read the letter to his 93-year-old grandmother in her nursing home. "She cried," David told Hal over the phone. "But they were good tears. She said to tell you that she forgives you for surviving when he didn't, and that she's grateful you lived a good life in his honor." As Hal entered his 3rd week, his condition deteriorated rapidly. He could no longer get out of bed, but his mind remained clear, and he followed every development. Team Kowalski found Billy's nephew in Detroit. Team O'Brien located Frank's grandniece in Boston. Team Kim found David's brother's son in Los Angeles. Team Rossetti found Mike's great-nephew in Philadelphia. But Team Washington faced heartbreak. They had traced James Washington's family and found his sister's daughter in Atlanta, but learned that the last surviving family member had died 6 months earlier. "We're too late," Pastor Johnson reported. 8-year-old Sophie Chen stood up from the back of the room. "But we remember him now, and we can make sure other people remember him too." The town decided to name the new elementary school playground the Corporal James Washington Memorial Playground, with a plaque telling his story. Team Bear Claw was still struggling. With only 3 days left, Mary Clearwater posted Johnny Bear Claw's story on social media groups for Native American genealogy and military history. On day 20, her phone rang. "This is Dr. Susan Bear Claw Mitchell. I'm a pediatrician in Denver. I think Johnny Bear Claw was my grandfather." Dr. Susan Bear Claw Mitchell drove through the night from Denver, arriving on day 21 with her teenage son Marcus and family photographs. "My grandfather left for the war when my father was 3, she explained in Hal's living room. "My grandmother kept his memory alive. She always said someone would come forward someday who knew what happened to him." Hal listened as Susan shared what she knew about Johnny's life. He had been a talented artist who carved wooden figurines. He had planned to become a teacher after the war. "Johnny used to carve little animals for us," Hal whispered. "I still have the bear he made for me." Hal asked for his most precious box. Inside, wrapped in cloth, was a small wooden bear, expertly carved and worn smooth from decades of being held. "He made this when I was homesick," Hal said, placing it in Susan's hands. "He said the bear would protect me and bring me home safely. I've carried it every day since Korea." Over the next hours, representatives from all 7 families gathered in Hal's living room. Despite his weakness, Hal insisted on reading aloud the final letter to each family. As the sun set on what might be Hal's last day, something extraordinary happened. The families began sharing stories about their own lives, their children, their hopes. They realized they were connected not just by tragedy, but by the ongoing ripple effects of their relatives' courage. Stanley Kowalski Jr. talked about how his Uncle Billy's sacrifice had inspired his son to join the military. Patricia O'Brien Sullivan shared how family stories about Uncle Frank had motivated her to become a teacher. Peter Kim revealed he had become an engineer, partly because his Uncle David had dreamed of building bridges between communities. The 7 families weren't just receiving information, they were becoming a family themselves, united by their shared connection to heroism that occurred before most were born. Hal died peacefully 3 days later, surrounded by people who had become family in 3 weeks. His last words were, "Thank you for helping me keep my promise." The memorial service filled the Millbrook Community Center beyond capacity. Representatives from military organizations across the country attended, along with hundreds of residents touched by Hal's story. The service featured readings of all 7 letters, along with testimonies from each family about what it meant to finally learn the truth about their relative's sacrifice. Johnny's wooden bear carving was displayed alongside the photograph of 8 young soldiers and the Bronze Star medals Hal had finally claimed. Marcus Bear Claw Mitchell read a poem he had written. 8 young men in a frozen land. 7 fell, 1 survived to tell. How courage flows from hand to hand, across the years like church bells, ringing out the names of those who chose to stay when they could go. The story spread far beyond Millbrook. News outlets picked up the story, veterans organizations shared it, and military historians began documenting it as an example of how individual heroism echoes through generations. But the most significant impact was local. Millbrook had been changed by those 3 weeks of collaboration. Neighbors who had rarely spoken had worked side by side. Teenagers had learned research skills while helping elderly residents navigate databases. The 7 families established the 8 Brothers Memorial Foundation, dedicated to helping connect other military families with information about their lost relatives. David Silva quit his job to become the foundation's coordinator. The families stayed close, meeting annually for what they called Promise Day. 5 years later, the town dedicated a memorial park where Hal's house had stood. The park featured 8 benches in a circle, each dedicated to one of the soldiers. In the center stood a bronze statue of a young soldier reading a letter. The park became a pilgrimage site for military families nationwide. The letter wall allowed visitors to post letters to military family members, both living and deceased. 10 years after Harold Thompson's death, the 8 Brothers Memorial Foundation had helped more than 800 military families connect with information about their relatives' service. The foundation's database included stories from every American conflict since World War II. Mayor Williams reflected on how those 21 days had changed the town's understanding of community. Hal didn't ask us to move mountains. He just asked us to help him keep a promise. But sometimes keeping one promise requires moving mountains. The wooden bear carving became a traveling symbol of the foundation's work. Marcus Bear Claw Mitchell, now a military historian, would bring it to schools where he shared his great-great-grandfather's story. People ask if I think my great-great-grandfather knew his sacrifice would have such lasting impact. Marcus would tell audiences. I don't think he did. I think he just saw a wounded friend and decided to help. But that's the point. We never know how our acts of courage will echo through time. Harold Thompson had worried he was the only one who remembered his 7 brothers from Korea. In the end, their names were remembered by an entire community, preserved in bronze and granite, taught in schools, and carried forward by generations who would never let their memory fade. The promise had been kept. But more than that, it had become a living legacy that continued to grow, proving that some bonds are stronger than time, some debts can only be paid forward, and some promises once kept never really end. In the community center where it all began, a plaque reads, "In memory of Harold Thompson, who showed us that the most important promises are the ones we keep for others." And every day, the people of Millbrook continue paying that debt forward, keeping promises to neighbors they may never meet, honoring connections that stretch across decades, and proving that true heroism lies not just in the moment of sacrifice, but in the lifetime of love that follows. 21 days had been enough to fulfill a dying man's wish, but the ripple effects of those 3 weeks would last forever, touching lives Harold Thompson never knew existed, but whose courage he had helped inspire simply by asking his community to help him keep a promise. The promise was kept, the memory lived on. And somewhere in the Pennsylvania hills, 8 young soldiers rest in peace, knowing their sacrifice was not forgotten, their brotherhood not broken, and their legacy not lost. They had saved 1 life in Korea in 1951. 70 years later, that 1 life had saved a community's faith in the power of promises kept and love shared. The circle was complete. The mission was accomplished. The brothers, all 8 of them, had finally come home.